As the current season of War Thunder comes to a close, I want to take a retrospective look back at every top tier aircraft and how it's performed in the 11.0 to 12.0 matchmaker. Now, I'm sorry Bomber players, but this is ranked purely on their air-to-air capabilities. However, if there are some identical aircraft, other factors will be taken into account. Also, just remember, I'm only human, and while I try and stay as objective as possible on these aircraft and their rankings, my biases as a player may play into some of these. It'll all be timestamped down below, so if you want to skip around to your favorite aircraft, feel free to do so, and the full tier list will be at the very end. And without further ado, real quick before we get into it, are you tired of having to actually pay for your Golden Eagles? Well, GE for War Thunder is the solution for you. By just completing some simple tasks, you can earn GE straight into your account at no extra cost. And if you use my referral code, you'll even get a bonus. Just download the mobile app in the description and you can start earning GE now. Starting with S tier, the MiG-29 is a very capable series of aircraft. The MiG-29 has the best flight performance in the game, the best radar missiles in the game, one of the best radars in terms of pulse Doppler in the game, and 4 R-60Ms, while not the most capable missiles, are still nothing to scoff at. This makes it the most meta aircraft in the game, which is why I'm putting it at the very top of S tier, as their capabilities just outmatch basically anything else in the game. The German MiG-29 sits slightly above the Russian one, as being an earlier block, it's actually missing a fuel tank if I remember correctly, and because of this, it's a few kilograms lighter. But in reality, you will never feel the difference outside of maybe specifically dueling. The F-16 is the NATO counterpart to the MiG-29's capabilities, and while it doesn't handle as well as high speed, it has better IR missiles in the AIM-9L. I put the F-16AJ as the most capable F-16, as the Block 10 flight model ironically is better than the Block 15 flight model. For whatever reason, Gaijin modeled it so that the larger elevators are actually a detriment to the aircraft. I have no reason why they did it, but it is the only Block 10 which has sparrows, making it the best F-16 in the game. Following that up, all of the other F-16s that have sparrows go in right behind it. While you don't have the better pull at high speeds, you still have the more meta aircraft loadout, and really loadout is key at top tier. And finally, you have the only infrared missile F-16s, which slot in right behind it. Just because you don't have radar missiles doesn't make it any less of a monster, and rounding out the S tier, I have the F-14A. While it doesn't have the best flight performance in the game anymore, it's still an absolute monster when it comes to armament. Having 4 to 6 radar missiles is absolutely nothing to scoff at, and it still absolutely destroys everything that's below it in terms of dogfight performance. And while you may not want to get into a dogfight with any of the aircraft above it, it's still going to be one of the best aircraft in the game. Starting off A tier, I have the Yak-141. This one was a really difficult one for me to place, as it has one of the best radars in the game, being even better than the MiG-29, and it has basically one of the best missile kits in the game if you don't look at the quantity of missiles. But the fact that it doesn't have very many missiles is what really holds it back. If you ever want to carry in this plane when your team falls apart, you're going to have to take the extra 5 to 10 minutes to return to base, because it's just so limited in its missile kit in terms of quantity of missiles. The more advanced family of MiG-23 aircraft are still absolutely nothing to scoff at. They can still hold a candle to some of the top aircraft in the game, but they're not the best plane in the game anymore. That's why I'm putting them right below the Yak-141 in A tier. The MiG-23 MLD can pull more AOA than the rest of them, which is why I'm putting it on top. The MLA is a slightly lighter version of the ML and should have a better radar. And they're all capable of carrying all of the R-24 missiles, which are still some of the best missiles in the game. On top of that, you still get 4 R-60Ms, which are good dogfight missiles. The Mirage 2000C is in a very similar situation to the Yak-141, where it has really good flight performance, but it's very limited by its missile kit. The Magic 2 is one of the only missiles left in the game that can go through flares every once in a while when you're shooting it in rear aspect, but the R530D is just really not what you want to be carrying in terms of a radar missile. It's still somewhat competitive, and I would probably take it over a Skyflash or something like that, but it's much worse than the AIM-7F and the R-27s. That being said, it still has such a good flight performance and a good enough missile kit to land itself in A tier. B tier is where we start getting into some aircraft with some more serious flaws. For these first aircraft, I mean, just having phantom flight performance in 2023 is no longer competitive, but their missile kits are just so good that you can't overlook it. The Kurnos 2000 is the best of all of them, carrying 4 AIM-9Ls and 4 AIM-7Ms, and having an internal gun, and having slats. The F4S is the same, though it has to carry an external gun, but the helmet-mounted display kind of makes up for it if you get into any close-quarters situations. It's also just a slight quality of life thing. The F4J is very similar to the F4S, but you have to manually deploy your flaps. Honestly, I might put it above the F4S just because you have a little bit more freedom of control, but for the average player, the F4S is probably going to be better than the F4J. The J70 is on the opposite end of things, where you have really competitive flight performance, basically on par with the F-14A, but other than that, I mean, having 4 rear aspect missiles is not what you want to be rocking at top tier. I mean, the missiles in question are pretty good, but still, it's only enough to land it in B tier. The JA-37D could be a really awesome aircraft, almost like a mini F-16 in how it plays, if it didn't have to rely on the Skyflash as its radar missile. Other than that, the high-speed handling is still pretty competitive at top tier. It's not great anymore, but it's like a more refined version of the Phantom, if you will. And it still has 4 AIM-9Ls, which is nothing to laugh at. A hard-wing Phantom in 2023 is just not very redeemable anymore. Luckily, Japan does have a better top tier now, but the F4EJ Kai just has such bad flight performance that it gets bumped way down. It's still up there with the other Pulse Doppler AIM-7F Phantoms because you really just can't go wrong with Pulse Doppler and AIM-7Fs, but other than that, there's not much that goes right with this aircraft. Getting into the C tier, these aircraft, while still playable, just aren't really competitive. And leading it off is the Su-17M4. Now, if you've never played this aircraft before, you're probably surprised to see it up this high. This may be my most biased pick, as this is one of my favorite aircraft in the game, but it's for a reason. It holds energy really well, and the swing wings help you tighten down that turn circle about as much as it matters. You have good guns, and you have 6 R-60Ms, which, while not the best missiles in the world, are still pretty good to work with. And then there's the early MiG-23 family, which I was debating putting above the Su-17, but the drop-off in flight performance just makes me not want to put it above it. You do get a little bit better kit in having 2 R-23s that you're capable of carrying, which are a far cry from the capabilities of the R-24, but it's still a long-range missile with the pull similar to an AIM-9J. Being a fast, variable wing aircraft helps it stay out of the lower tiers, and the armament is good enough to be capable. And now we're getting into basically all of the MiG-21s. I think the J-8B is the most competitive as it has a good radar missile, and the radar, while not having Pulse Doppler, is probably one of the best regular radars in the game. You also get the PL-5, which is one of the most meta infrared missiles in the game, and it has more thrust than even the MiG-21bis. And now we have all of the MiG-21bis. Well, besides the Finnish one, because I forgot about it, but it's literally identical to the Russian one. They're all basically the same in that they lose all of their speed in a turn, and the kit of 6 R-60s, when you lose all of your speed in a turn, is just not what you want to have. The laser being a premium goes on top, the regular MiG-21 is in the middle, and the MiG-21bis Sol, you know, the SAU, goes on the bottom just because I think it's the ugliest, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it has less ground attack ordnance as well. The JA-37C is identical to the JA-37D, except you have AIM-9Js instead of AIM-9Ls. Definitely not really a good missile anymore, especially with the big drag nerfs. They just don't do anything outstandingly well. The Kurnos and the F4E are in a really weird position right now. I still have a lot of fun with them, but the truth of the matter is just they're not really that good anymore. The Kurnos is better than the F4E as it has AIM-9Gs over AIM-9Js, which have nearly 3 times the range and just as much pull. Other than that, they're identical, and they have the dogfight AIM-7Es, so not really the greatest radar missile, especially when you don't have a pulse Doppler radar either. Still, I would take the Phantoms over the Tornado, which basically has the worst airframe in the game, at least at top tier. While the kit may be good, I just don't want to play a plane that actively kills me by falling out of the sky. Now, the Kafir is what happens when you take a delta-winged aircraft and give it even worse missiles than any of the other delta wings I've reviewed before. The J8 and all of the MiG-21s just do everything that matters better than the Kafir. The only thing the Kafir has going for it is its absolute speed, but only having AIM-9Gs is kind of sad in the current state of the meta. Though this is changing next patch, but we're not talking about next patch. All of the British Phantoms, if you heard me before on the F4 EJ Kai, I mean, a hard-winged Phantom is just not acceptable in 2023. While these still have Pulse Doppler, they don't have AIM-7Fs. They have Sky Flashes, which you can literally dodge just by rolling, and they have to take a gun pod. So they're just not really that good of aircraft. The F-104 ASA has had a massive fall from grace. While you're still an absolute rocket in terms of speed, only having 4 AIM-9Ls in the current state of the AIM-9L is not what you want anymore, and thus it ends up much lower than I ranked it before. Fun fact, the J7D is actually a MiG-21MF, it's not even a MiG-21bis. It's still pretty capable because it has 4 PL5s, which, I mean, as long as you're slinging missiles around, you can still be somewhat playable, but having a 10.3 aircraft's flight performance at 11.0 is not very good. Remember everything I said about the Mirage 2000C earlier? Well, let's drag it out even more. You have to take a gun pod instead of having internal guns, and you only get 2 Magic 2s. Still, you have absolutely cracked flight performance, which keeps it from dropping to lower tiers. The rest of these aircraft are just straight up bad. The MiG-27 family is just heavier versions of the MiG-23M. However, they do have the best gun in the game, but they have even less armament as well in terms of missiles. At top tier, that's just not acceptable. We have the Mirage F1C family of aircraft now, and they all basically fly the same. The Mirage F1 and the Mirage F1C200 are identical, but one of them gives you premium bonuses, and the Mirage F1CT just has 1 less gun. They have Magic 2s, which are usable, but you only get 2 of them, and other than that, it has no other redeeming qualities. The F4 EJs is what you get when you strip literally everything that makes the Phantom good. You don't get Agile Eagle or any slats at all, you're a hard-winged Phantom. But you don't get upgraded engines like the British Phantoms do, and you don't get Pulse Doppler, and you don't even get Dogfight Sparrows. Still, they're kept out of F tier purely because of the sheer number of missiles that they're able to carry. The F-104S family is basically everything I just said about the Phantoms, but even worse considering it turns less and can carry less missiles. Also, if you want to take Sparrows, you gotta get rid of your gun, which is not a very good trade-off. Finally, we have F tier, the bottom of the barrel. And the Harrier GR7 has 4 AIM-9Ls, which the AIM-9Ls are in the worst state they've ever been. And it's a subsonic aircraft. Still, it can at least kind of dogfight, which makes it, I mean, I'm not gonna say good, but it's better than everything else here. We have all of the ground attack Tornadoes, which only get 2 AIM-9Ls and have no flight performance at all. And then we have the A7K, which only has 2 AIM-9Ls and no flight performance to speak of, and is subsonic. Now, in terms of new additions to the next patch, let's speculate a little. The F-14B is probably going to be better than any of the F-16s now, at least in AirRB that is. The F-14 is more capable in a team fight, especially with the improved engines, and having more missiles is always better. Plus, now you have all aspect missiles instead of carrying around the AIM-9H as your heat seeker. I think it's still going to be a little bit less meta than the MiG-29, but who knows, it may turn out to be the best aircraft in the game, and I'm just talking about nothing right now. The Kfir C7 is definitely going to move up a lot when it gets Pythons, so be on the lookout for that. And speaking of Pythons, the J8F is also in a very similar position as the Kfir, though having 6 of them instead of 4 probably puts it above the Kfir. And then there's the copy and paste Mirage 2000, which is just gonna go below the Mirage 2000C as it's at a higher battle rating and doesn't offer anything extra in terms of air-to-air capability. Well, that's the end of the tier list. Let me know what you think, and if I missed anything, make sure to let me know in the comments. Other than that, that's all for this video. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.